Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to be showing you a very strong build that you can run for solo PvP in just 4.1 gear. Starting off by looking at our build. For the weapon, we're going to be using the Great Nature Staff, and for our armor, we're going to go with a pretty classic combo of the Mage Cowl for our helmet, Cleric Robe for our chest piece, and Soldier Boots for our boots. Now, since we are going to be going out and using this build in 4.1, no cape is necessary. However, just a normal cape can help a little bit, as it does give a little bit of energy and energy regeneration. So you don't have to run one if you want to save even more money, but running a 4.1 normal cape is also pretty good. For our food and potions, we're going to be going with beef stews, or really any type of stews. You can go lower tier if you really want to save money, but I wouldn't recommend it. And then for our potions, it is poison potions. For the abilities, starting with the Great Nature Staff, you on your Q ability want to run Thorn Growth. For your W, 90% of the time you want to run Revitalize. However, there are situations where Bramble Seed can be a little bit better. And then for your passive, normally you're going to run Calmness, although you can run out of energy in super long fights if you don't take the energetic passive. So you can take the energetic passive as well if you think the fight's going to go really long and you might run out of energy. For your armor, it's the special abilities across the board, and for your passives, you're going Aggression on your helmet and your chest piece, and then Toughness on your boots. I will also note you can also change the second ability on your Mage Cowl, Bop as it's commonly referred to. However, I would suggest only doing this if you really know what you're doing with it and are a little more experienced. Lastly, for our build, just to quickly touch on specialization and IP, the clips you're going to see me doing in this video, I am running 4.1 with around 100 spec in every piece of the build. However, it's not really needed that you have high spec with this build. It can work at low spec as well, but obviously it gets increasingly better the higher specialization and higher IP that you have. Okay, so just starting with the general playstyle of this build, the Great Nature in this build is all about rotating through your defensive cooldowns while you slowly whittle away your enemies. So very briefly, for those of you that don't know how the Great Nature's E ability works, it is a very interesting, very powerful E. It basically puts a buff on you for 4 seconds that will increase your resistances a little bit, but more importantly, every time you take an instance of damage in that 4 seconds, you'll get healed by a flat amount. Meaning, if people hit you while you have your E active, you'll actually heal more than the damage they're dealing to you very often. So for your basic playstyle, when people try to attack you, you can use, say, your E and have that damage be ineffective or even healing you. And then once your E runs out, you can use your Cleric Robe to become immune for a while. You can use your W to heal yourself back up, and then you have your E up again eventually, and you can do that to heal yourself back up again or prevent them from doing damage to you again. It is recommended to kite a lot during this build, especially when you don't have cooldowns. So when your E is active, you can sort of man up and fight people, but if your E is on cooldown, you can sort of kite away from them, putting your thorns down behind them in the path they have to get to you, just to sort of kite them and wait for time for your E to get back up, so you can do that effective auto attack damage again. This kiting sort of playstyle is especially important when you're up against multiple opponents. The other thing to think about when you're looking to fight with the Great Nature is whether you should be using Bramble Seed on your W or Revitalize. So like I said earlier, 90% of the time you're going to want to Revitalize, as it's just a really solid spell. It can heal you up if they're ever not attacking you, or if you ever get a little bit of space from them, you can heal yourself back up. It's extremely powerful. However, The Great Nature doesn't have as much offensive potential as some other weapons, and so if someone's running away from you or you're going to struggle to kill them, running Bramble Seed instead of Revitalize on the W can really help you kill them and catch them with that knockup and extra damage that it allows you to do. So generally my advice would be to stay on Revitalize for most of the time, and if you find someone that looks like they want to fight you and they're a really good matchup for the Great Nature, like you don't need the extra healing for Revitalize, such as Bear Paws for example, where if they E you, you can just E yourself and you basically get the full health off of that bleed, then you can go something like and switch to Bramble Seed and be more offensive and give yourself a better chance of actually killing them. In terms of tips for your playstyle and getting better at winning fights, the number one thing I would suggest is to make sure that you are holding your soldier boots. Wanderlust have a really long cooldown, but it's a really powerful mobility spell, and since Great Nature doesn't have any other mobility built into it, these boots are all of your mobility, and so you need to make sure you're holding them for either escaping or finishing off your target. As a Great Nature, you will not be able to chase people down and kill them if they decide to run from you without having your boot spell. You just don't have the mobility and the damage to catch them. Same thing with escaping. While you are very defensive, you have no mobility, so if you get ganged up on by a bunch of people and you don't have your boots, you may be able to survive for a while, but you're never actually going to escape unless you get your boots back up. So don't use your boots if you don't have to use your boots. Only use them when you're pretty sure you can kill them within the duration of the boots or as soon as you need to escape. Another tip that's really important and helpful is that Revitalize, despite being this sort of channeled heal ability, can actually be used as this really quick sort of mini heal. So instead of just casting Revitalize on yourself and just waiting as it slowly heals you up over time, you can cast it and then instantly cancel it or move, and you'll get that first tick of healing instantly, and you basically won't lose any time in the channel. So if you're in a situation where you need to be chasing somebody or running away from somebody and you can't afford to lose that space you have in between them, but you still need to heal yourself up a little bit, you can just very quickly instantly press W and then keep on moving, and you pretty much won't lose any time and you'll still get a little bit of a heal. Another really helpful tip if you are on Revitalize for your W is to combo it with your Cleric Robe. So the W's duration as you're channeling it gets shorter. It will basically get cancelled if you take damage. However, the Cleric Robe makes you invulnerable to damage. So if you cast the W while you're Cleric Robe, people cannot interrupt the cast, and Cleric Robe also boosts your healing output when it's active. So basically you can heal up insane amount, basically to full HP, if you use your W on yourself while you're in the Cleric Robe. So a really common combo is to use your E at the start of the fight, and then once you get low, pop your Cleric Robe, pop your W on yourself, you get healed all the way back up to basically full HP, and then by the time they get you back low again, you'll have your E up once again. Lastly, for tips, I've never really actually had to use this one myself, but if someone's playing around your E really well, so basically when you E yourself, they just stop attacking you to make sure you don't get any healing, one thing you can do is you can combo your E and Revitalize together, using them both on you at the same time. If you do this and somebody doesn't hit you, well then they're not slowing that duration of your Revitalize, you're going to get the full Revitalize channel off, but if they do hit you and try to cancel that Revitalize, then they're just giving you healing off the E buff, meaning there's no really great play against somebody who is using Revitalize and the Great Nature E on themselves at the same time, except for like a little stun to cancel the Revitalize without doing too much damage to the E. I will note here, however, as well though, that you don't usually want to use these together as it's a little bit overkill. You don't need the healing of the E and the W too often. This is really just if you're noticing people not hitting into your E and being very careful around it, you can get that full value from your W. Okay, last, to just quickly finish off this video by looking at the pros and cons, or the strengths and weaknesses of this build. Just starting off in general, the Great Nature and this build is extremely strong versus lots of damage instances or damage over time. So weapons that do a lot of different instances of damage, like I mentioned Bear Paws before, that have those bleeds and that dots, it's very hard to work on the Great Nature E. They're typically just going to give you a lot of free healing. However, on the counter to that, it is generally weak against burst type weapons, weapons that do minimal damage sources, but those damage sources are very high, so they hit you really hard but infrequently, because then your E isn't really going to get very much value. More specifically now, looking at the pros to start with, first off, this weapon in this build is so good at 1vxing. You don't really care as much as other weapons and other builds if you're fighting multiple opponents. Remember, the way your E works, every time you take damage while that thing is active, you will heal a flat amount. And so if there's more people, there's going to be more people hitting you, and so there's going to be more damage instances hitting your E and healing you up even more. As you can see here, I'm literally in 4.1 diving a group dungeon team, and they can't even get close to killing me every time I E. I just get right back up to full HP. Another pro is that this build is very easy to fame farm with and spec up. Nature Stab's Q ability, the Thorn Growth, is so unbelievably powerful against mobs, and the Great Nature specifically, you can do large pulls because of that E ability allowing you to heal up through the damage, so you can really fame farm up pretty fast with this build. And specifically with the Great Nature, if you're looking at speccing up your weapon and just doing the Great Nature is probably the single fastest fame farming weapon in the build if you're willing to invest into a good set and do some solo static or group dungeons. Another really big pro, one of my favorite pros to see on a weapon, is it has a low skill floor and a high skill ceiling. Basically what this means is that it doesn't take much skill or expertise with the build or weapon to be successful at. Anyone can sort of pick it up and do pretty well. However, it also comes with an immense room to grow and get extremely good at the build. A master with this weapon and with this build is absolutely terrifying. They are so difficult to bring down. Lastly, for our pros, this is sort of a funny one, but it just destroys noobs. People that do not know the way your E works will just hit into it and give you so much free healing. You basically can't lose to somebody that doesn't know how your E works because they will just heal you up to full every time you cast it. Moving on to the cons of this build, obviously no build can be perfect, and probably the number one issue with this Great Nature build is that it is a healing stick for your weapon, and so the overall damage you can output is quite low. It just simply does not do as much damage as the sort of more damage-based weapon lines. The consequences of this are things like it's harder to be aggressive and finish off players or fight players that don't want to fight you, and more importantly, if you're up against a healer, you pretty much can't beat a healer because they will just out-heal your damage. Actually, funnily enough, if you meet somebody else in a Great Nature, you literally cannot kill each other unless someone makes a massive mistake. Next for cons, this build is quite weak against purges, especially multiple purges. You have three things in your build that are really important to get value out of: your E, your cleric robe buff, and your soldier boots. If any of these get purged, it can be a pretty sticky situation, so people with purges are pretty hard to play around, and especially if they have more than one, it can be really rough. Lastly, for our cons, I want to put this as a con. It is pretty rock, paper, scissorsy in terms of matchups, what you can beat and what you can't. Like I talked about, if they have high damage over time, then you pretty much win the matchup pretty easily, but if they don't have much damage over time and are more bursts of damage, it's very hard to win, so it can be a little rough sometimes, especially as metas change. Some weapons and some builds you just beat without any issue, and others you basically always lose to, no matter how well you play. Okay, real quick before we end this video, as I was about to put this out, the NDA patch notes came out and it looks like SBI is looking to nerf the Great Nature. Of course they are. Every time I put out a video on something they have to nerf it. So this likely won't be quite as good coming up soon when it gets nerfed. However, judging from the nerfs that I'm looking at, it's not going to kill it. It'll probably just make it a little bit more matchup specific and make it just slightly worse. So it'll still be doable. You can still do this with the nerfs most likely, but we'll have to see. Alright, and that is all you need to know to conquer the lands of Albion with your 4.1 PvP gear. I hope this video helped you out. If it did, do all of the things that you do to YouTube videos, and I will see you in the next one.